After 5 failed attempts to secure ceasefire in Gaza, United Nations Security Council finally reached an agreement. The resolution has been passed that demands 3 things. Number 1, an immediate ceasefire. Number 2, unconditional release of hostages. And number 3, access of aid and food into Gaza. Now, there is a wave of happiness and jubilation around the world, and why not? After all, world is going to see some kind of peace after 5 months of ruthless killing. But there is another side to this resolution which must be spoken about. There are people who are speaking about it, but I feel, well, that's not enough. We need more people come forward and make this resolution really lasting. The problem is that it says immediate ceasefire, but just for the month of Ramadan. That's just 2 weeks from now. And then it goes on to say that leads to lasting and sustainable peace, but it does not explain what do these things mean. So on one hand, the resolution is asking Palestinian fighters to give up all the hostages, which is their biggest hope, to have any kind of sensible negotiation. It is their insurance policy. So the resolution is asking them to give up on that hope, and you will have a temporary peace, and after that we will leave it up to Israel and the US and all the other backers of Israel. They can do whatever they want to do, because we are not going to tell you what lasting and sustainable means. And this is a serious problem, because you're really asking Palestinian freedom fighters to do something which is unthinkable. You're asking them to take their insurance policy, giving up their insurance policy in exchange for just 2 weeks of brief respite and then a hope. And hope to who? It's Israel we are talking about. Hope and Israel, they cannot coexist. There are people, there are countries who are concerned about it, mind you. 14 countries said yes to this, 1 country abstained, that is the US. And the countries that voted in favor of it, they are actually concerned about it. For example, Russia, they are concerned. The Russian ambassador and the permanent representative at the United Nations, Mr. Nebenzia, he does point this out and shows his resentment. This is what he had to say, because his country actually recommended the word permanent, but that was changed in the last minute, and now we have the word lasting. We don't really know what it means. Similarly, France also pointed this out, but they also went a step further and they came up with an actionable recommendation. French ambassador and permanent representative at the United Nations, Nicolas de Rivière, condemned United Nations' deafening silence on the ruthless bombardment that came from Israel. And then he also noted that the Ramadan is not good enough. I mean, the ceasefire until the end of Ramadan is not good enough. This is what he had to say. So what he is suggesting, and his country is recommending, that there has to be an immediate ceasefire, even though that is going to be until the end of Ramadan, but then the council must regather and work for a permanent ceasefire. Because if that does not happen, we frankly don't know what is going to happen to innocent Gazans. You cannot leave it up to Israel to interpret in a humanitarian way, because we are talking about Israel, people who have no regard for the sanctity of human life, people who have no regard for the lives of children, women, including pregnant women, the elderly, the ill, the disabled, the hospital, the church, the mosque. They don't have any regard for any of those. So we really hope that the world will come forward yet again, and before the end of Ramadan, people of conscience will sit together. The United Nations will do its job, and the countries from around the world, they will pressurize their governments into coercing Israel for agreeing upon the notion of a permanent ceasefire. Mind you, the US itself came up with a bizarre notion of this resolution not being binding, even though the Article 25 of the United Nations is very clear that it is going to be, all the resolutions are binding, but United Nations is taking an exception to that. Of course, they have to explain. I have a different video coming on to that and why they are doing that. What is the history of Israel disregarding these? But this video is on the premise that Israel will accept it, But then what happens after the Ramadan? Well, that is something which remains to be seen.